So you want to main the Morrigan, Phantom Queen. First, ask yourself, why do you want to main the Morrigan? She can turn into any god on hers and the enemy's team. Morrigan is a complete teamfight changer. She has a decoy which can fool enemies. But before you choose to main her, it's good to know the cons of the Morrigan. She's definitely not beginner friendly. Her escape is easily interrupted. Morrigan is a SMITE Celtic Mage. SMITE has classified her as a very hard god, and I agree, she's pretty hard. If you're an experienced Morrigan player or you just love playing her, feel free to leave any of your own tips down in the comments below. In this guide, we're exploring Morrigan in mid, going through her abilities, attack cancelling, combos, builds, counters, what not to do, and general combat tips. We'll be going through this guide from a Conquest perspective, but don't worry, you can easily implement this guide into other game modes as well. With that, let's go through Morrigan's abilities. Morrigan's passive, Doomsayer. Morrigan's passive is a basic attack stim. The third hit of Morrigan's hit chain will explode. This deals damage to all enemies within range and dooming all enemies hit. Doomed enemies will take additional basic attack damage over time. Keep in mind that it is every third hit in her attack chain and not every third basic attack. So if you wait too long in between a basic attack, you will reset her hit chain, thus not activating the passive. If you do hit them with the explosive basic attack, you will apply tick damage to the target for 3 seconds. Morrigan's passive is nice, but it's not that important, and honestly, you won't get it off much on an enemy. It is more important for clearing though. But with that in mind, her basic attacks are still very important to use, regardless of the third hit. Morrigan's first ability, Deadly Aspects. Morrigan's 1 is a charge up ability type. When activated, Morrigan begins combining the power from all 3 of her forms. When activated again, they simultaneously damage and stun enemies in front of them. This ability will stun enemies for 1 second. You can cancel the ability Charge Up and will not take any mana or put it on cooldown. This ability is her main CC. Morrigan's second ability, Dark Omen. Morrigan's 2 is a projectile ability type. Morrigan launches a wave of magic at her enemies that deal damage. It will deal bonus damage to minions. This ability applies an omen to enemy gods for 8 seconds. Gods with an omen will take bonus damage the next time they are hit by any damaging ability. You can see that they are omened if they have an icon above their head. And this works from abilities from both yourself and your allies. So your allies will be able to do bonus damage to the enemy that is omened. This ability is Morrigan's main clear and damage. Morrigan's third ability, Confusion. Morrigan's 3 is a stealth ability type. Morrigan creates a phantom of herself while becoming stealth. This will increase her movement speed. The phantom runs the targeted area, deals no damage, and will die if it takes any damage. If Morrigan attacks or takes damage, she will be revealed and lose her increased movement speed. This ability is Morrigan's main escape and engagement, although it's not the best escape and it is easily interrupted. Morrigan's ultimate, Changeling. Morrigan's ultimate is a transform ability type. Now this ultimate is literally the hardest ultimate in the game, so please listen closely. Morrigan selects a god from the current match, ally or foe. She will become a copy of them and cleanse herself of all effects. She will copy all their current stats and may use all of their abilities for the duration, but she will retain her own relics and cannot use consumables. The rank of her abilities will transfer to the skills of the god she copies. This ability's cooldown will be increased to match the target's god ultimate ability cooldown. You may hover over a target and cancel to pre-select them, so you do not need to use the cursor on activation. This ability will last for 10 seconds. So basically, you turn into a god that your teammate or opponent are using, you will copy their stats, but you will retain your relics and your own ability rank. For example, if you maxed out her second ability, Dark Omen, for the damage, but you want to turn into, for example, Thor, you would have Thor's second ability max ranked as well, which is not very useful because it's just a stun. So generally, early game, you want to turn into gods where the translation would make sense. It's really hard to explain who you should turn into. Generally, just play careful and know what god is needed for each situation. Don't transform into gods you have no idea how to play. Team fight, transfer into a god with useful abilities for that fight. Keep in mind, useful does not mean the most damage. Sometimes you might need a Khepri ultimate. Solo kill, transform into a god who could burst the enemy down easily, like an assassin. Don't turn into gods with bad builds or who are behind. I know that is a lot to take in for one ability in the game, but that's why she's also the hardest god in the game. Now this is important to know, how to pre-select a god. So as you see in the left hand corner, it's an empty frame. That's because you don't have a god pre-selected. This is what happens when you ult without a pre-selected god. As you can see, I have activated my ultimate and will now have to choose who I want to turn into. This is pretty terrible if you need to quickly turn into someone mid-fight, but your screen is covered by a bunch of gods and can get you pretty overwhelmed. To pre-select a god, hold the button for your ultimate, right-click or whichever button you can use to cancel an ability on console. You have now pre-selected a god. So as you can see, their icon is now in the frame. So now if you do use your ultimate, you will turn into that god straight away. If you do not want to turn into your pre-selected god, like you figured a different god would be better for this situation, you will just have to hold your ultimate again and then left click or attack button on console to turn into that god. Now let's get into the leveling priorities for Morrigan's abilities. For the first 5 levels, at level 1, her 2, at level 2, her 1, at level 3, her 2, at level 4, her 3, at level 5, her ultimate. For leveling priority, her second ability for increased damage overall, her first ability for increased damage, her third ability for increased movement speed and stealth duration, or her ultimate for decreased cooldown. So basically, 2, 1, 3, or 4. I would max the third ability over the ultimate if you have a build with a lot of cooldown. I would max the ultimate over the third ability if you do not have a lot of cooldown. Remember that when you transform into another god early to mid-game, you'll retain your ability ranking. Attack cancelling for the Morrigan. Attack cancelling allows for some extra damage. Basically, if you watch closely, it will cancel out some of the animation and go right into another basic or ability. This gives you consistent DPS and is not mandatory to learn if you don't want to. For her first ability charged up, use her first ability and fire a base attack right after. For her second ability, her 2 on quick cast or instant cast, as soon as you basic attack, fire her second ability and another basic attack. Combos for Morrigan. Before we get into combos, a few pointers. Morrigan makes use of her basic attacks, and that is due to not having any impactful abilities other than her ultimate. The only abilities outside of her ultimate that do damage are her first and second ability. Remember that Morrigan's third ability is both her escape and engagement. You can also use Morrigan's ultimate as an escape by turning into a god with a better escape. I would recommend having Morrigan's second ability on quick or instant cast. Remember that you have to charge up her first ability, the animation is a bit slow. Remember that you put an omen on the enemy when you hit them with your second ability. Any damaging abilities from yourself and allies will proc it. Remember that her third ability will give you increased movement speed. If using her stealth for ganks, use her third ability on the spot and then proceed to gank. If using her stealth in front of an enemy, you can use it however you see fit, but having your decoy run into a direction, like for example, making it look like you're running into the jungle, to the minions, towards them, etc., can distract them and confuse them sometimes. You can use basic attacks as well in between if you have time to pull it off, especially if you're building Polynomicon. For short combos, 3, 1, 2. This combo works nicely with allies around to proc your second ability, and also if you want to use your ultimate right after. 3, 2, 1. If an enemy doesn't have an escape, this works nicely as you will proc your own damage, but you have to land both abilities for this to work. Keep in mind when stealthing to engage, that you can charge up your 3 at any point when running towards the enemy. If you do it early, the enemy might hear it and prepare for it, If you do it when you're right next to them, they might be quick anyway and get out. Builds for Morrigan. Builds always depend on what kind of enemies you're up against. My builds in this video are just a general guideline. You can adjust accordingly depending on your game and situations. For a Season 5 damage/mid build, Tier 1 Book of Thoth, Shoes of the Magi for early pen or Shoes of Focus for cooldown, finish Book of Thoth, Spear of Desolation for cooldown and pen or Bumper's Mask for more mobility, Polynomicon, Obsidian Shard, Soul Reaver. Another build you can run for early cooldown, this is the build I ran in my video, Mage's Blessing, Tier 1 of Spear of Desolation, Shoes of Focus, finish Spear of Desolation, Polynomicon, Soul Reaver or Obsidian Shard, grab both depending on what you need first, Divine Ruin for anti-heal or another situational item. Other items you can pick up but not limited to are Divine Ruin for anti-heal, Cronus Pendant for cooldown, Magi's Cloak for crowd control, Book of the Dead. For jungle, you can pretty much build the same except pick up Assassin's Blessing instead as a first item. For relics, Morrigan generally picks up Purification Beads and Aegis Amulet. Some people do like to pick up Blink on Morrigan, just keep in mind that it doesn't work with her first ability. So you would have to blink first and then activate her first ability. Counters of the Morrigan. Morrigan's first ability, her stun, is countered by beads and Magi's Cloak. Enemies who are very aware. You can listen for her first ability and prepare for it. Bad builds and gods that are behind. Turning into them will not benefit the Morrigan. Bad ability ranking, Morrigan wouldn't benefit with a max rank Thor 2. Not knowing how to play a lot of the gods on SMITE. Seriously, you need to learn a lot of them to make her useful. AoE abilities, bad positions when trying to escape. Her third ability is actually not that reliable. Once you're in, it's hard to get out. Mystical Mail or any other form of tick damage counters her stealth and will bring her out of it immediately. Do not stealth if you have tick damage on you already. What not to do as the Morrigan. Do not engage with your stealth into dangerous situations. Do not transform into gods you don't know how to play. Do not transform into gods only because they have damage. Each transformation should be catered to a situation. Do not transform into gods who are behind early game or who have bad builds. Do not play Morrigan if you don't really have a comfortable pool of gods that you understand. Seriously, it will be torture for you and your allies. Do not ignore her basic attacks. Try to use them when you can. General combat tips for the Morrigan. Fun fact, if Morrigan turns into Baron Sumdi, you and your allies can buy Baron's Brew. It may not be worth it, but hey, it's there. If using Blink, you cannot charge up your first ability and then use Blink. It won't work. Try to transform into gods who you are most comfortable playing with and who are doing really well. Remember that Morrigan's third ability is not a great escape. It's really easy to counter, so make sure you play carefully. Honestly, I would just say play like you don't have an escape. If you rely on your third ability too much for escapes, it honestly won't end too well. Morrigan is great at poking and setting up potential kills for your allies. Try to learn which gods would be the best for each situation. Remember, it's not always about who does the most damage. Ask yourself in each teamfight, do you need burst, crowd control, setup? Remember that you can use your ultimate as an escape. Practice landing her auto attacks or get used to using her auto attacks. She relies on this as well since she only has 2 damaging abilities outside of her ultimate. And that is all for the Morrigan guide. If you would like to request a god guide or simply just to support me, you can find a coffee donation link in the description box below. Subscribing and likes would be super rad, clicking the bell really helps me out. I also suggest checking out my community tab from time to time. I put out some things that probably would be interesting for you if you would like to check them out as well. I hope to see you for the next one. Bye!